Hey there, everybody. This is Anna Callahan, and you are listening to Incorruptible Massachusetts. Our goal here is to help you understand state politics. We look at why it is so broken. We imagine what we could have in our lives if we fixed it, and we're here to help you get involved. So I love having my two co-hosts here, Berg Powers and Jonathan Cohn. Jordan, do you want to intro yourself?
Yeah, my name's Berg Powers. I use he, him, and I have 11 years experience in Massachusetts politics.
Awesome. Jonathan?
Jonathan Cohn, also he, him, here in Boston, and I've been working on issue and electoral campaigns here in Massachusetts since 2013.
Fantastic. So last week, we talked about the power that the speaker has inside the State House. And this week, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into how deep that rabbit hole goes. I kind of think about this whole podcast as being like the blue pill or the red pill. It's about taking the red pill from the Matrix. And if you didn't watch the Matrix, taking the blue pill means you're happy to believe all those comfortable things, that everything here is fine and nothing is wrong, and Massachusetts is a progressive state, and you go about your life. But taking the red pill means learning the truth, even if it is deeply uncomfortable and disturbing. So today we're going to talk about the sort of cultural reality inside the State House and why you can't just replace the speaker, for example. So I'm actually going to quote Jonathan Hecht, who came on this podcast. I think it was episode 4 of season 1. And so you could listen to that if you want his whole thing. But he talked about how if you go back 30 years, the House met much more frequently. They met several times a week in full session. And a lot of other things happen more as more debate and more votes on amendments and all that stuff. So he said that in 2017, 2018, the amount of time that reps spent in session together was about a quarter of what it was 30 or 40 years ago. More importantly, he said that if you go back 20 years, then you can see that the number of Democrats who were willing to vote against the speaker on any particular bill used to be between 20 and 35%. But in the last few years, it's been between 5 and 10%. So there used to be an active check on what the leadership, the speaker and the leadership team could force through. And now there's just no willingness to stand up and say, no, we're not going to do this. And what Jonathan Hecht said, he says, the culture and the system reinforce each other. So it would require a significant change to both to the systems, to the rules and the practices, as well as to the mindset of the participants. That if you can't change the mindset of the participants, you're not going to get change. And that's a tough nut to crack. I know, Jonathan, you've talked about sort of the belief about how things work inside the building.
Exactly, because if you think about how kind of such a culture becomes deeply embedded in how everything works, what I think about is how often state representatives will talk about how much relationships dominate what happens in the building and how their ability to succeed depends on having good relationships with various other legislators. And what that if that becomes your theory of change and your theory of how the building works and how you achieve whatever, even if modest goals you want, suddenly that kind of changes the behaviors that you'll take. If you want to maintain a good relationship with the person who is the chairman or chairwoman of this committee, you'll then not want to do things that will ruffle their feathers or that will make them look bad. And so, for instance, when we're talking about voting off, if voting against the speaker risks making this nominally progressive chairperson that I want a good relationship with look bad, then I suddenly start thinking twice about whether I want to do that, even though I know what the actual principled position to take is. I want to maintain my relationship with that person in power. And it's the power, you can see the power of the speaker in the way that it's not even just a series of one-to-one relationships of representative to the speaker, because you can also have the dynamic is that if I want a good relationship with let's say Bob, and Bob wants a good relationship with the speaker, I'm doing the same thing as if I were the one trying to get on the best terms with the speaker, because I'm trying to appeal to Bob, and Bob won't do anything that pisses off the speaker. So suddenly we're all falling in line, even if I myself would not believe that I'm falling in line with the speaker. I'm just trying to maintain a good relationship with Bob.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's a system that has gotten so much worse than when I think even when I started at Mass Alliance and before Mass Alliance, as former representative Hecht pointed out, like everyone tells me how much worse it is. I said that the last time that a conservative rep said to me that they imagined more freedom in the Chinese Communist Party in voting. When I first got to Mass Alliance used to be a place that had meetings outside the building, sort of secretly, although I guess not that secretly, of the Progressive Caucus. And it brought the Progressive Caucus, revived it, brought it together, tried to get it going. And the speaker, DeLeo, at the time, thought that was a threat. Like, God forbid people meet with each other and strategize how to pass legislation without his oversight. And so he, sent former Representative Rushing to tell my former boss, the former executive director of Mass Alliance, Georgia Hollister Isman, that you should just stop. We've got the Progressive Caucus, we'll organize it. And so half the people in the Progressive Caucus ended up being people who were quick to tell the speaker what was going on. And so there was a legislative fight, and it quickly dissipated. No one trusted anything that was said in the Progressive Caucus, and it just fell apart from there. We had a new person come into there, try to reform it, try to meet outside the system, and that person successfully organized on some policy. We actually won some policy through their organizing effort. But then that person had another rep tell on them to the speaker, and then that person felt like they got stabbed in the back, and they stopped trusting people and stopped going to the to Progressive Caucus meetings. And then that person's like, well, I mean, if I can't organize because I can't trust anyone, and I can't trust anyone, I might as well, for my district and for the things I care about, try to move up into leadership, because at least then that's a path, right? Like, at least that's a rational thing. So you get this self-reinforcing system where because the leadership has been able to infect such distrust and such negative culture among each other, you get this place where no one trusts each other. And to be clear, they shouldn't, because people will trade information for access and moving up. They will trade your faith in them, with like minuscule opportunities for self-perceived power, which is disheartening and disquieting, but the reality.
And this explains a conversation that I had when I first kind of moved back to the area in 2018. I was so excited. I was like going to all these meetings, and I went to a meeting with some state reps, and I talked to one of them afterwards, and I said, hey, let us know what the Progressive Caucus is planning, because we can be your boots on the ground. We can help you build demand for the policies you need, and we can help you get the word out. I mean, we can do all this stuff. At the time I was talking about our revolution. And what I heard was, oh yeah, the Progressive Caucus is just a complete joke. It's people who get together where there's always a few of those people. The only reason that they're there is to run and tell the speaker and stab everybody in the back so that we all get punished. And I was like, what? My mind was like, I couldn't believe it. I was like, no, that can't be true. But it sounds like that's what happens.
So this kind of reminds me of, I remember hearing somebody having made the joke before about the time at which the US Communist Party had shrunk to the point where the only people attending meetings were the FBI agents spying on the Communist Party. There's kind of that, if a good share of the people attending the meetings regularly are only there as informants, you lose that. You can have some decent policy discussion, but you're not having organizing.
For sure. I know, so I've interviewed a bunch of former state reps, people who aren't state reps anymore, but were within the last 10 years or so. And one of them said that in 2015, That was when the speaker ended his own term limits, which were part of the reason that he got elected, was because he was going to have term limits. And then he, of course, once they came up, ended those. That was DeLeo. When he got those term limits, at the same time, they also increased the pay for all these, chairs and co-chairs. But this state rep said that the worst thing that happened was that it increased the number of paid leadership positions to 80. And their phrase was, why would anyone ever dissent again? Why would anyone ever dissent again? They can control kind of a majority. I think, Jonathan, you were mentioning this.
Exactly. That speaks to, if you have 80 seats already of people who are indebted to you for their position, and that they know, as we spoke last week, that running afoul of you without having express advance approval. I'll quickly aside, one thing that does often happen is representatives seek, if they're planning to vote against the speaker, ask for approval for doing so. So that it's not even that kind of check on power that you discussed before. It's more theatrical than that. So if you want to fall in line from that, you've already have a situation that you have the majority locked in, and that sets the conditions where it's then in anybody else's perceived best interest to fold.
Yeah, so for folks who don't know, 80 is a majority in the state house. So you have only 160 reps, and if 80 of them, their pay is linked to being loyal to the speaker, then you've built in a system whereby they will always have the majority.
Yeah, and I do also want to add a little bit to our list. Last time we did like a list of what the speaker controls. And I was looking at my notes from some of these former state reps. One of them went through like a long, extensive list of the ways that the speaker controls your life and your ability to do your work as a state rep. So things we mentioned last time are like whether you're a chair or a co-chair, which is, in a way allows you to partially control the agenda of those committees, what your pay is, because, you can increase your salary by 20, 30, 40, 50, $60,000. How many staff you get, where your office is, and where you sit in the chamber. The things that we didn't mention last week that I kind of dug up in my notes are they control your committee assignments. So like which ones you're even on. The speaker approves all staff hires. You have to send a letter to the speaker for anyone that you want to hire. The speaker assigns your parking space. So how far you have to walk to get into the building. The speaker approves reservations to use the common rooms for meetings. The speaker decides who gets to travel for meetings paid for by the House. The speaker gets to appoint people to commissions, and the speaker gets to determine whether you can be on any official speaking programs. It's like insane the amount of things the speaker can control within your life and your ability to get your work done.
I worry that the Chinese Communist Party is going to start taking notes on how to better control their members.
So, Jonathan, I know I love the way that you talked about it, which was like people get convinced that what it's about is relationships inside.
Yeah, because as we were noting before, that you can really see that about how it really just to speak to the self-reinforcing nature of the culture with that, about how if you have so many incentives stacked up to say that you want to fall in line with the speaker, that you want to fall in line with those who are trying to fall in line with the speaker, and like every step down in the way, it gets to what we were discussing before about how it's a kind of a deeply embedded cultural problem that resists one-off solutions. And it speaks to, and as well as one thing that we were kind of discussing before, part of the ultimate solution is electing new and better representatives in many of the districts in the Commonwealth. But you also need a kind of a constant set of reinforcements, because anybody that you're electing is immediately going to start falling into, let's say, the quicksand that is the Massachusetts House. Anybody who was like a small child in the early 90s knows that knows that quicksand is everywhere. And so you're in a situation where like almost like every week of the session, people are being worn down. and especially if you see all of the obstacles to you trying to accomplish what you believe you're there to accomplish, you're at constant risk of being worn down, and accepting that you just need to abide by the rules, the quote unquote rules of the game.
Yeah.
And if you're not constantly kind of constantly trying to bring in additional people who have the ability to like help them get out of quicksand, even partially, that they'll fall further, the new people fall further, and the system remains intact.
And you also have talked about this idea that like the leadership team is very good at painting this picture that people can actually accomplish something. Like they get a little something, they're accomplishing something if they do what they're told. And you've talked about how small those things are and how they
exactly, because it's the case where reps will develop a theory of change that it's not 100% false, but it's not quite true either. And so it exists in that space where there's an internal logic of knowing that, oh, well, if I got this earmark from my district, right, because of voting against things that I co-sponsored, got me these earmarks from my district, it shows that I have actually succeeded at something that I've wanted to do. Or if this bill of mine managed to finally get in at the last moment, and it did, you managed to get a tangible small win, but your larger ambitions out of the building, if you have them, not everybody does. And that's also part of the problem, that many of them have their greatest ambition in life is to cut a ribbon at some new opening in their district. But if you do have larger ambitions, those small wins and kind of accepting that as enough makes it harder to achieve anything more ambitious. As well as it also creates a dynamic where one could even accept that if you were to be a rep and you accept that you're going to take a small wins, perpetually foreclosing off the ability of the changes that make big wins possible strategy, you could say, okay, you accept that road and do it, but at least allow others to embrace an alternative strategy and to recognize that they want to ultimately help you to achieve more down the road. That won't happen either, because of the dynamics of the person who is accepting that path of small wins and foreclosing upon long-term gains will likely view it as a personal offense of that other person's strategy, as well as, so you'll have that dimension of it, they think that will make them look bad, so don't want somebody else taking that strategy. They also, even as we talked before, even if they view themselves as being well-meaning, could likely in that type of paternalistic, almost the maternalistic way, oh, you don't want to do that, you'll get nothing. Type way of try to bring those people further and further in. And so it just ends up kind of reinforcing that culture that makes actual systemic change of the scale needed increasingly difficult.
Yeah. And let's not leave this podcast without talking about how we fix this thing, right? So it's not impossible.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd say I've talked to a lot of people who think, really what we need to do is fix the systems or the culture. And I am always suspicious of those things. I guess long believed that what we need to do is just replace this toxic system with a progressive who will be a little bit less toxic, right? Like that's, I think, my very, very, at this point, cynical belief on what is possible in the Massachusetts State House. I hope I am wrong. I deeply hope I'm wrong, but I am cynical about them being able to reform themselves in any sort of real way. I actually believe that where there is hope, where there is a way that we can fix this system is with us. Like, I just think, the way that we will fix this broken system is for us to actually fix ourselves and have a functional outside the building community where when people do things, we thank them for doing the right things. And when they do the wrong things, we say publicly, you did the wrong thing. And we don't just say it to ourselves. We don't just say it on Facebook, although I will say those are critical parts to good communications. We are saying them to the local media in their communities, and we're calling their their voters in real time and talking to them about the good things that people are doing and the bad things that people are doing. Not because we like or dislike somebody, not because they're bad or good, but because you need people to know, voters to know, when people do good actions and when they do bad actions. It's really simple, and it's the way most functioning states have a functioning outside their elected bodies, right? Like that's how you function as a community. You inform voters and let voters sort of say, I didn't like that, or I did like that, right? And you rest your future on those things. So the power is with us to fix this thing. Like, there are things that we can do. We should have better, we should send elected officials who understand this broken system and are interested in not just being a part of it, but are interested in going there and sort of being outside the system for a little while till we can get enough people to take it over or to fix the culture, right? But we also need to fix us, and we really need to be focusing on what are we doing to pressure them to do the right things and not ourselves replicating or being a part of this really broken system.
Yeah, I think I'm probably as cynical as you, because I think in addition to having an engaged public, I mean, I knocked on doors, as a state rep candidate last cycle. And what I heard over and over was, no one has ever come to my door to talk to me about state politics. I heard people just outraged. People were like, what? I had no idea. And these are people who vote they know everything about national politics and they vote in their local elections. Like, these are not disengaged people. So number one, I totally agree with you that we need an engaged public, like for sure. Like, people need to understand that we could be having an amazing, wonderful life here in Massachusetts, and it is the failure of our state government that we are not. But I also believe that we are not going to bring the reps we have back. I think we need to replace a ton of people with a group that has been trained in the culture and in how to work together and not rat each other out to the speaker and to the powers that be, and who have deep relationships with their own constituents and with a coalition of partners statewide as well. But I think it can be done. I think that we just get everybody focused on state politics and make it happen. That's my theory. Jonathan, any thoughts about that?
So one idea that your comments gave me was how it would be very fun to get to videotape candidates for state representative giving messages to their future, possibly elected selves about what they would say to them if their future selves start parroting all of the bad excuses that they're criticizing on the campaign trail. And then whether you tee it up with some specific lines that they might end up saying, or just allow free form, it would be a fascinating exercise to do, and kind of have that type of reality check and grounding that I think is so important for politicians really at all levels to keep.
Great. We'll make them do that next time. Thanks to you both. We'll see everybody next week.
Thanks so much.